Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel and thank you for choosing to watch my video. Today I wanted to take a look back at the Blade games and see if they were really as bad as the reviews indicate. I rarely ever see either of the two Blade games mentioned in any YouTube video covering Marvel games. These two titles are rarely talked about. Blade is one of the most badass comic book characters and has always been one of my all-time favorites. Blade made his first appearance in the Tomb of Dracula issue number 10 in July of 1973. Blade's abilities consist of master martial artist, skilled swordsman and marksman, highly knowledgeable about vampire lore, superhuman strength, speed, agility, and stamina, enhanced senses, accelerated healing, immunity to both vampire bites and vampire hypnosis, slowed aging, and ability to sense supernatural creatures. In 1998, Blade starring Wesley Snipes was released and is a film I can still enjoy to this day. Blade the video game came out 2 years after the film had been released and was a prequel to the film. Many believe that if the game had been released the same year as the film, it would have had much more success. Blade runs on the same engine as Quake 2 on the PlayStation, and you could tell from the gameplay that a first-person engine being adapted to a third-person title will have its issues for sure. I decided to play Blade and see if it really deserves the negative reviews, or is it worth going back to 20 years later and giving it another try. Firing up Blade, I was instantly hit with a wave of nostalgia. The graphics definitely did not age well, but when I see that low poly look that old PlayStation games had, I really get taken back. Blade is a really dark game, but some of the back textures really stand out in the dark. 6 years into the PlayStation's lifespan, and you would expect for Blade to look slightly better than titles that came out before it, but that definitely was not the case. The controls are very clunky, movement was similar to Resident Evil's tank controls, and Blade had some platforming which were unfavorable with the way the moving works in this game. Combat is okay. You get a small arsenal of weapons. You start off with a handgun with regular and silver bullets. Most human enemies can be taken out with 3 to 4 shots with the regular ammo, while silver bullets will kill them in 2 or sometimes 1 shot them. There is also this other type of enemy that is more close quarters, and they attack you with what looks like a machete, and they are easier to kill with your sword. You can also kick your enemies with circle, which is almost always kick the enemy to the floor, giving you a slight advantage while dealing with more than one enemy at a time. You then retrieve the shotgun, which is used to kill zombies, which is what they look like to me. You can also use a grenade launcher and a machine pistol to combat your enemies. The combat can be extremely annoying at times as you constantly have to be changing weapons in order to take them all out, and I feel that constantly changing weapons in this game really slows down the pace. Something that really bothered me was some of the spawning of enemies. There was a few times where I would toggle a cutscene, and as soon as the cutscene was over, I would already be being attacked by an enemy or spawning an enemy at a game save location. Enemies do a lot of damage to you as well. One hit from a melee enemy would deplete the majority of your health. I really enjoyed how non-linear the game was as well. For example, the first boss fight can be triggered in different ways. The first way is going through some doors that are obviously presented to you. There are zombies, vampires, and blood everywhere, and it's pretty chaotic. There's a lot of enemies attacking you at once, and you have to find multiple keys and a code to a lock, and you retrieve the shotgun and face off against your first boss in what seems like a small office. The other way to toggle it is if you go in the opposite direction. You find a corridor that leads you to the outside of a ship, and you need to go inside the ship, fight some ninjas, and turn the power on, and suddenly you're confronted by the same boss in a warehouse type room. Getting to the boss was the fun part. The actual boss fight, not so much. All you have to do is run, jump on a box, blast him a few times, and do it all over again. While the controls are clunky and the combat is repetitive, I wouldn't say this is one of the worst games I've ever played. It's not a memorable experience. It's not up there with some of Marvel's greatest games, but I enjoyed half my time with it and the other half was a bit of frustration. I would give this game a solid 5 out of 10. Blade 2 was released September 3rd, 2002, the same day the DVD was released. Blade 2 was available on Xbox and PlayStation 2, with the former having the better graphics. Blade 2 the video game takes place 6 months after the events of the movie. At least the timing of the release was better this time around. The graphics were good for being on the PlayStation 2, and the movement was very similar to the first Blade game, except much more fluid. You control movement on the camera with the left thumbstick, and the right thumbstick was used for a new concept at the time, which is the 360-degree combat system. Trying it out in the tutorial had me really confused at first, but once I started the first level, I got the hang of it very quickly. And it is extremely repetitive, and if you want to pull off any combinations, you must move the right thumbstick in slow combinations instead of flicking it quickly, which is very counterintuitive when you're being attacked by multiple enemies. It did come in handy to flick the thumbstick towards an enemy in front of me to punch him, and if another enemy came up behind me, I would flick it in his direction and Blade would throw a back kick without having to fully change the character's direction. Too bad there are very little animations for hand-to-hand combat. You're always going to be throwing the same punches and kicks. The first few levels primarily take place in a parking garage garage and cars will randomly try to run you over. Pressing circle and moving in any direction will make Blade do a flip, and I felt so badass when a car would be heading towards me and I would side flip and avoid it, and the car would crash and blow up for greater effect. You also start off with a machine pistol and can unlock more weapons as you progress through the game. You choose your loadout before the start of the level and can unlock them based on how many points you've collected so far. There was some cool slow-mo animations when fighting enemies, like sticking a stake through their head, which was very cool, but the main excitement of the game for me was getting to use your sword. You slice and dice your way through enemies while limbs are flying everywhere, and that is where the 360-degree combat system shines. Unfortunately, using your sword is temporary and you have to rage in order to use it, which refreshes about every 5 minutes. It was a very dumb idea, limiting the most exciting weapon in the entire game. Anytime I was able to use my sword, I was having a blast. A fun weapon to use was Blade's Glaive, if that's what it's called. When you equip it, you hold X to charge up. The longer you hold X, the more enemies it will target, and it will fly like a boomerang while decapitating your enemy. The worst thing about Blade 2 has to be the enemies. First off, they die really fast, only taking 2 punches to defeat them, and the enemy AI was horrible. I would stand in front of a group of enemies and they wouldn't come near me unless I attacked first. I honestly think that Blade 2 could have been one of the great Marvel games if they had changed a few things, such as level design, changing the 360-degree combat system to use the front-facing buttons instead, improving the enemy AI, and not limiting the use of your sword. This title had a lot of potential and I had a lot of fun playing it, but anytime I started to really get immersed into the game, I would once again run into bad enemy AI or another section of a level that looked identical to the previous one. And with the combat moves being so basic, I can't say this game is great, it's just average. I would rate this game a 6.5 out of 10. Please let me know what you think of these two games in the comments below, and give a like if you enjoyed the video, subscribe if you would like to see me cover more games, and thanks for watching.